Broadcasting around the world, this is On the Record with Christian Briggs. Serious talk about what's happening around the world and how it affects you. Unfiltered truth for a world on edge. Follow us on X at BMC_HAM. Live in 3, 2, 1.
In part one of our Palantir podcast last week, we examined the company behind the software. We looked at its origins, its early funding, its relationship with the intelligence community, and the philosophy of the executives who built it. But understanding Palantir means understanding something much larger than Palantir itself. Software doesn't exist in a vacuum. It becomes powerful only when the world around it begins producing the kind of data it was designed to consume. That world is now taking shape. Over the past 2 decades, governments and corporations have quietly transformed the way identity works. Not long ago, proving who you were was remarkably simple. You carried a driver's license in your wallet. Maybe you had a passport tucked away in a drawer for international travel. Financial institutions asked for a social security number, and that was usually enough to establish your identity. These systems weren't perfect, but they were largely independent of one another. Your bank didn't automatically know where you traveled. Your healthcare provider didn't know what you purchased. Your local police department didn't have access to your financial history. Information existed in separate silos, making it difficult for anyone to assemble a complete picture of your life. Technology has changed that equation. Today, nearly every interaction leaves behind a digital footprint. Every online purchase, every GPS navigation request, every rideshare, every credit card transaction, every social media account, every medical appointment, every airline reservation, every smart device in your home contributes another piece to an expanding digital profile. Individually, these records appear harmless. Collectively, they create something far more valuable, a comprehensive map of a person's habits, relationships, movements, interests, and behaviors. For governments and large organizations, this presents both an extraordinary opportunity and a daunting challenge. The opportunity lies in connecting information that was once isolated. A customs officer might verify a passport, review visa history, check watch lists, and confirm biometric information within seconds. A hospital could instantly retrieve medical records from another state. Banks can identify suspicious transactions in real time, helping to reduce fraud that once cost billions of dollars each year. These advances have made many systems faster, more efficient, and in some cases, more secure. The challenge is scale. Every day, humanity generates astonishing amounts of data. Financial institutions process millions of transactions. Airports handle millions of passengers. Hospitals generate enormous volumes of patient information. Law enforcement agencies receive reports from thousands of jurisdictions. Intelligence organizations collect signals from around the globe. The sheer volume of information has become impossible for human beings to analyze on their own. Organizations increasingly rely on sophisticated software to organize, correlate, and interpret it. That is where digital identity becomes far more than a driver's license or a passport. Increasingly, identity is evolving into a dynamic profile assembled from countless data points. Biometrics, such as fingerprints, facial recognition, iris scans, and voice authentication, are becoming more common. Mobile phones serve as authentication devices. Online accounts verify financial transactions. Governments around the world are experimenting with digital credentials that can be presented electronically instead of through physical documents. Many countries are exploring national digital identity systems designed to simplify everything from paying taxes to accessing healthcare and government services. Supporters argue that these systems represent the natural evolution of a digital society. They point to faster services, reduced fraud, improved cybersecurity, and greater convenience for citizens. Instead of carrying multiple documents, a person could verify their identity with a secure digital credential. Public services could become more efficient. Criminals using stolen identities would face additional barriers created by biometric authentication. Critics, however, see a different trajectory. Civil liberties organizations have warned that as more information becomes linked to a single digital identity, the consequences of misuse grow significantly. A centralized identity system creates a powerful target for hackers, foreign adversaries, and malicious insiders. Privacy advocates also question whether systems built for convenience today could gradually expand into broader forms of monitoring tomorrow. History offers numerous examples of technologies introduced for one purpose that later found applications far beyond their original intent. These concerns do not necessarily stem from the technology itself. They arise from the question of governance. Who controls the data? Who decides how it is used? What legal safeguards exist? Can mistakes be corrected? Can citizens see what information has been collected about them? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when separate databases that were never intended to communicate suddenly become interconnected? Those questions lead directly to the next chapter of this story, because digital identity by itself is only one piece of the puzzle. Information still exists in countless databases maintained by governments, corporations, hospitals, financial institutions, transportation systems, and law enforcement agencies. The real technological challenge is not collecting the data, it is making sense of it. And that is precisely the problem Palantir was built to solve. If digital identity is the collection of puzzle pieces, Palantir's software is designed to help organizations assemble the puzzle. That distinction is important because it addresses one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding the company. Palantir is not a social media platform. It does not manufacture smartphones. It does not operate a nationwide camera network or maintain a consumer search engine. Instead, the company's core business has been building software that allows organizations to integrate, organize, and analyze information they already possess. The value proposition is not collecting more data. It is making existing data usable. That may sound like a subtle difference, but in practice, it is an enormous one. For decades, governments accumulated vast quantities of information that rarely communicated across agencies. One department maintained immigration records, another maintained criminal databases. Financial regulators monitored suspicious transactions. Intelligence agencies collected foreign intelligence. Local police departments documented investigations. Military organizations gathered battlefield information. Each system often operated independently, built on different software using different formats and following different security rules. Analysts sometimes describe these as data silos. Critical information existed, but connecting it required enormous amounts of manual effort. Investigators might spend days requesting records from multiple agencies, comparing spreadsheets, reading reports, and attempting to identify relationships that no single database could reveal. Palantir's software was built to reduce that friction. Its flagship government platform, Gotham, is designed to ingest information from multiple authorized sources, preserve the original records, and allow analysts to explore relationships among people, places, organizations, events, and objects. Rather than replacing an agency's existing databases, the platform is intended to sit above them, providing a common environment in which authorized users can search, visualize, and analyze information according to their permissions. Imagine an investigator examining a complex criminal network. Phone records might come from one system, financial transactions from another, vehicle registrations from a third, border crossings from a fourth, surveillance reports from yet another. Individually, none of those databases necessarily tells the complete story. Together, they can reveal connections that might otherwise remain hidden. That is the type of problem Palantir was created to address. Over time, the company's technology expanded beyond intelligence and defense. Hospitals have used Palantir software to analyze operational data and resource allocation. Manufacturers have used it to monitor supply chains. Energy companies have used it to coordinate infrastructure. Financial institutions have explored ways to identify fraud and operational risk. In the commercial world, the companion platform Foundry focuses on integrating information across large organizations so that executives and analysts can make decisions using a shared view of their operations. More recently, the company has invested heavily in artificial intelligence through its artificial intelligence platform, or AIP. Rather than treating AI as a standalone chatbot, the idea is to allow approved AI systems to interact with an organization's existing data while respecting security permissions and audit controls. In principle, an analyst could ask complex questions in natural language and receive answers synthesized from multiple authorized data sources, instead of manually searching dozens of separate systems. Supporters argue that this approach solves a problem modern organizations can no longer ignore. The volume of information has become so large that human analysts alone cannot keep pace. Software that can organize data, identify patterns, and surface relevant relationships can shorten investigations, improve logistics, reduce fraud, and help decision makers respond more quickly during emergencies. In sectors such as disaster response, military planning, or public health, advocates contend that speed and coordination can translate into lives saved. Critics raise a different set of questions. Privacy advocates, legal scholars, and civil liberties organizations have long argued that as data from multiple systems becomes easier to combine, the potential consequences of mistakes also increase. If inaccurate or outdated information enters a highly connected analytical platform, it can influence decisions across multiple agencies. Critics also worry about mission creep, the gradual expansion of a system beyond the purpose for which it was originally deployed. A platform introduced to combat terrorism, for example, could later be adapted for other forms of law enforcement or administrative functions, depending on policy decisions and legal authorities. Another concern involves transparency. Much of the software used in intelligence and national security operates under confidentiality restrictions, making it difficult for the public to evaluate exactly how certain systems are used in practice. Oversight mechanisms vary by jurisdiction, and debates continue over the appropriate balance between operational effectiveness, privacy, and civil liberties. These questions are not unique to Palantir. They reflect a broader challenge confronting nearly every organization that develops powerful data integration and AI technologies. As software becomes more capable of connecting information across domains, societies must decide where legal and ethical boundaries should be drawn. Understanding that distinction is essential. Palantir does not create every database it analyzes. It does not automatically grant access to information an agency does not already possess. Its software generally operates within the permissions established by the organizations that deploy it. At the same time, the ability to connect previously isolated information can fundamentally change what those organizations are able to see and understand. That brings us to the next evolution in this story. If platforms like Gotham are designed to make sense of existing information, what happens when the amount of information flowing into those systems expands dramatically? What happens when cameras, sensors, vehicles, drones, license plate readers, and other connected devices begin producing continuous streams of real-time data? The conversation shifts from analyzing historical records to observing the world as events unfold. And that is where companies like Flock Safety enter the picture.
Okay, you know how they say birds of a feather flock together? Well, some communities around the country are coming together to fight against what they say is a concerning form of surveillance. AI startup Flock Safety is building an army of police tech. They are most recognizable for their automatic license plate readers you may have heard of, which snap a picture of the car's plate as it drives by. Police say the technology helps them solve crimes like kidnappings, murders, and stolen vehicles. And while this tech, it has existed for some time, Flock is now the first to centralize it into a single nationwide database that thousands of police departments can access at any time without a warrant.
For most of modern history, surveillance was limited by one unavoidable constraint: people. If law enforcement wanted to monitor a suspect, it required officers in the field. If investigators wanted to review an incident, they often relied on eyewitness testimony, security footage that might or might not exist, or hours of manual detective work. Cameras were expensive, storage was limited, information was fragmented. Even when evidence existed, finding it could take days or weeks. That model is changing. Over the past decade, thousands of communities have deployed networks of connected cameras capable of automatically capturing and analyzing information as vehicles pass through an area. Among the best-known providers is Flock Safety, a company that manufactures solar-powered automated license plate reader, or ALPR, cameras. Unlike traditional traffic enforcement cameras, these systems are designed to document objective characteristics of passing vehicles, license plate numbers, vehicle make, model color, distinguishing features, and the time and location where they were observed. Supporters describe the technology as a force multiplier for public safety. When a vehicle associated with an Amber Alert, a reported kidnapping, or a stolen car investigation enters the field of view, the system can alert participating agencies within seconds. Investigators searching for a suspect vehicle no longer have to rely solely on chance encounters or eyewitness recollections. Instead, they can search historical detections across participating jurisdictions to reconstruct where a vehicle has been observed over time, subject to the policies and legal authorities governing that agency's use of the system. Law enforcement agencies have credited automated license plate readers with assisting investigations involving violent crimes, vehicle theft, organized retail crime, and missing persons. In situations where every minute matters, advocates argue that the ability to rapidly locate a vehicle can significantly improve investigative speed, but the same technology has also become the subject of an increasingly intense public debate. Civil liberties organizations have argued that systems capable of recording the movements of millions of ordinary drivers raise profound privacy questions. Unlike targeted surveillance directed at a specific suspect, automated camera networks may record information about anyone who passes through their field of view, regardless of whether that individual is connected to any criminal investigation. The debate becomes even more significant as these networks expand. One camera covering a single intersection provides a limited snapshot. Hundreds of cameras distributed across an entire metropolitan area begin to reveal travel patterns. Thousands of cameras spread across multiple cities can provide an increasingly detailed picture of vehicle movement over time. While agencies generally establish retention periods and access controls, critics argue that the broader the network becomes, the greater the responsibility to ensure meaningful oversight, transparency, and accountability. Those concerns have fueled lawsuits, legislative proposals, and public hearings in jurisdictions across the United States. Questions about how long data should be retained, who may access it, whether it can be shared with other agencies, and what safeguards should govern its use remain active topics of legal and public policy debate. This is where the conversation returns to something we discussed earlier. Collecting information is only one part of the equation. The larger challenge is understanding what that information means when combined with countless other sources. Public reporting has documented that some law enforcement agencies have used both Flock Safety's technology and Palantir's analytical software as part of their investigative workflows. The two companies provide different capabilities. Flock focuses on capturing and managing vehicle detection data, while Palantir specializes in integrating and analyzing information from multiple authorized sources. Whether and how those systems are connected depends on the individual agency, its technical infrastructure, and the legal framework under which it operates. That distinction matters because it is often misunderstood. There is no single nationwide platform that automatically merges every camera, every police department, and every government database into one universal surveillance system. The reality is considerably more decentralized. Different jurisdictions use different technologies, adopt different policies, and operate under different legal constraints. Integration, where it occurs, is typically determined by the agencies deploying the software rather than by the software companies themselves. Even so, the broader trend is unmistakable. The tools available to investigators today are dramatically more capable than they were 20 years ago. Cameras generate continuous streams of information. Cloud computing makes it possible to store enormous amounts of data. Artificial intelligence can assist with searching, filtering, and identifying patterns that would have taken human analysts far longer to uncover. As these technologies mature, they increasingly allow investigators to move beyond isolated incidents and toward understanding broader networks, timelines, and relationships. For supporters, this represents the modernization of public safety in a digital age. They argue that criminals already exploit smartphones, encrypted communications, and sophisticated technology, and that law enforcement requires equally modern tools to investigate serious crimes efficiently and effectively. For critics, the same capabilities illustrate why strong legal safeguards are essential. They argue that technologies designed for legitimate investigations should remain subject to clear limits, independent oversight, and robust protections against misuse, ensuring that the expansion of analytical power does not outpace the safeguards that protect individual rights. This debate is no longer confined to police departments or city councils. It is rapidly becoming a global conversation.
On the Record with Christian Briggs will be right back after a word from our sponsor. Gold has more than tripled since September 2022, rising from $1,656 per ounce to over $5,000 by February 2026. That's a 205% gain, outperforming the market, and proving why gold is the ultimate long-term hedge. As global debt soars and currencies weaken, central banks are hoarding gold at record pace. Why aren't you? Call 844-426-4653 or visit bmcham.com. Protect your future with real assets. Own gold now.
Because the same technologies that help a local investigator recover a stolen vehicle can also be adapted for border security, military logistics, critical infrastructure, customs enforcement, intelligence analysis, and national security. Around the world, governments are investing billions of dollars in systems capable of integrating massive amounts of information to improve decision-making. And that is where Palantir's story extends far beyond the United States. The company is no longer simply an American defense contractor. It has become a participant in a worldwide race to build the digital infrastructure that many governments believe will define national security in the 21st century. Those concerns have fueled lawsuits, legislative proposals, and public hearings in jurisdictions across the United States. Questions about how long data should be retained, who may access it, whether it can be shared with other agencies, and what safeguards should govern its use remain active topics of legal and public policy debate. If Palantir's story ended at America's borders, it would already be one of the most influential technology companies of the 21st century. But it doesn't. As governments around the world have confronted increasingly complex security challenges, from cyber attacks and organized crime to illegal trafficking, terrorism, military competition, and supply chain disruptions, they have all encountered the same problem. They possess more information than ever before, yet making sense of that information has become exponentially more difficult. That challenge isn't unique to Washington. It exists in London, Tokyo, Canberra, Berlin, Warsaw, New Delhi, and dozens of other capitals. Every government collects data. Customs agencies track the movement of goods. Border officials record entries and exits. Financial regulators monitor suspicious transactions. Health ministries oversee public health systems. Together, they create an enormous web of disconnected information. The question governments increasingly ask is straightforward. How do you transform millions or even billions of individual records into information that decision makers can actually use? That question has fueled a global market for data integration platforms, and Palantir has become one of the most visible participants. Over the years, the company has announced contracts with a growing number of allied governments and public sector organizations. In the United Kingdom, Palantir has worked on projects involving the National Health Service, while also supporting defense and security initiatives. Across Europe, the company has collaborated with military organizations, law enforcement agencies, and ministries responsible for national security. In Australia, Palantir has worked with defense and government agencies on data analysis and operational planning. Similar partnerships have been announced in Canada, Japan, South Korea, and throughout NATO countries as governments modernize their digital infrastructure. The details vary from country to country. Some organizations use Palantir to coordinate military logistics. Others focus on customs enforcement, emergency management, healthcare operations, or fraud detection. In many cases, the software is intended to help agencies respond more quickly by integrating information that previously existed in separate systems. Supporters argue that this reflects the reality of modern government. A cyber attack doesn't stop at national borders. Supply chain disruptions ripple across continents. Organized crime operates internationally. Human trafficking networks span multiple countries. Financial crimes often involve institutions in several jurisdictions. In that environment, officials argue that governments need software capable of coordinating information at the same speed as the problems they are trying to solve. Critics, however, see another trend emerging. Civil liberties advocates have questioned whether the rapid adoption of sophisticated analytical platforms is outpacing the legal frameworks designed to govern them. As governments become more dependent on complex software developed by private companies, questions arise about transparency, accountability, procurement, and democratic oversight. How much visibility should the public have into systems that influence critical government decisions? How should independent auditors evaluate software that operates in sensitive national security environments? And where should the line be drawn between legitimate operational secrecy and public accountability?
Okay, let me ask you something. If you wanted to build a national digital ID system, a system that tracks every website you visit, every forum you post on, every article you read, how would you actually get the American people to accept it? You wouldn't call it a mass surveillance bill. People would riot. You would call it something completely bulletproof. You would frame it as a moral imperative. You would say it's to protect the children. I was looking at the recent legislative push in Washington, specifically a piece of legislation known as the Kids Act. On the surface, it sounds like exactly what every parent wants. The politicians go on cable news and say, we have to protect kids online. We have to stop them from seeing harmful content or getting addicted to social media. At first, I thought, fair enough. Who doesn't want to protect children? Our kids are in crisis. We all see it. But then I started reading what the bill actually requires. I almost skipped over the enforcement mechanism because they always bury the real agenda under hundreds of pages of legal jargon. But it's there, and it's staggering. According to a recent analysis from CoinDesk, they called the Kids Act, quote, way worse than digital carding. They explicitly called it a mass surveillance system. Hold on. Why would a cryptocurrency and tech publication care so much about a child safety bill? Because it's not really about child safety. It's about digital identity. Think about this. Under this legislation, if an online platform has to prevent minors from accessing certain content, how do they prove who is a minor and who isn't? They can't just ask you to click a button that says, I am 18 anymore. They have to verify your age. And how do you verify age on the internet? By forcing every single user, adults included, to hand over a government-issued ID, a credit record, or biometric data just to access an artificial intelligence service or a website.
We'll say that things are under the guise of the safety of children. But then when you actually open the hood and look at what's under there, it's being used as a smokescreen for everything that big tech lobbyists want. And what big tech lobbyists want is a national surveillance program where they can harvest the private and personal data of every American with zero actual protections for people and their privacy and victims of some of the most heinous crimes that we've seen in America. And we don't have to just talk about this as though this is a theoretical issue. Just a couple of months ago, Discord, a platform where a lot of kids have been targeted and put in danger, mind you, tried to roll out this idea of a data verification or an age verification technique. They contracted out to a third-party private company to do facial scanning of not just kids, but also adults. They decided to launch a teen default setting where they will lock you into a quote-unquote, what they call a teen-appropriate experience, which means you can't access certain content, which, mind you, if you are an adult that does not opt in, you then get cordoned off into the teen experience. Explain to me how that has anything to do with children's safety. And then, if the only way to get out of that censored version is by scanning your face, but what's more shocking is that Discord made the decision to move forward with this after they had been hacked and at least 70,000 users had their data stolen. So I don't see, even on the other side of this, kids were not protected, but a lot of people's privacy was violated.
You're probably wondering, Christian, are you saying I have to scan my driver's license just to read an article online or use an app? Yes. That is exactly what this means. Every system of age verification demands that users hand over sensitive personal information that links their offline identity directly to their online activity. Now, think about what we just discussed in the previous segment about Palantir. We talked about how this company and others like it are building the back-end digital infrastructure for governments and the Fortune 500. We talked about the explosion of data and how advanced software connects information that used to exist in isolated silos. If the Kids Act becomes the law of the land, every single American will be forced into a digital identity grid just to use the internet. Your offline physical identity will be permanently tethered to every digital footprint you leave.
For years, members of Congress have been debating ways to protect kids online. And last night, the House of Representatives passed a sprawling internet child safety bill. The Kids Internet and Digital Safety Act, or KIDS Act, is already coming under fire. 7 News I-Team investigative reporter John Barr has been tracking this debate and joins us now with more. John?
Well, Jasmine, this vote caught a lot of stakeholders off guard. The KIDS Act passed the House over the strong objection, meanwhile, of a longtime child safety advocate. The legislative package includes elements from 14 separate internet safety bills, like the much debated Kids Online Safety Act. But we spoke today with Maureen Flatley from the group Stop Child Predators. Her biggest concern is that, in her words, this bill does nothing to go after those who actually prey on kids online.
Part of the concern that I've had from the beginning is that while I don't want to give anybody a free pass if they're doing something that's harmful to kids, by failing to focus on the producers of the content, you're not stopping anything.
I kept asking myself, who is going to manage all that data? Who is going to store the biometric scans, the government IDs, the facial recognition logs of hundreds of millions of Americans? It's almost like, no, it's exactly the kind of massive interconnected surveillance database that the intelligence community and companies like Palantir specialize in building. Well, the establishment will tell you that it's completely safe. They'll say the data will be anonymized, but we've already seen several breaches of age verification providers. Once that valuable data is collected, it can be leaked, hacked, or misused. But privacy, actually, maybe privacy isn't even the right word anymore. It's about leverage. If the government knows exactly who you are, what you read, and where you post, because you were forced to log in with a government ID to comply with the Kids Act, they don't just have your data, they have leverage over your entire digital life. That surprised me because the politicians pushing this, they are using the very real, very legitimate fears of American parents as a Trojan horse. They are smuggling in a Chinese-style social credit and digital ID system, wrapping it in a bow and calling it child safety. And if you oppose it, they won't debate you on the merits of the surveillance state or the Fourth Amendment. They will just look at the camera and say, you don't care about protecting children. It is an incredibly cynical, incredibly effective political trap, which naturally raises the next question.
If the digital infrastructure for surveillance state is already being built by the tech giants and the legal framework is being quietly passed by Congress under the guise of child safety, what happens when artificial intelligence is deployed to monitor all that newly verified ID linked data in real time? Ultimately, this conversation extends far beyond technology itself. The same systems that can improve security, streamline government services, and combat crime also raise important questions about privacy, oversight, and the concentration of power. As these capabilities continue to evolve, the debate is no longer just about what technology can do, but what society believes it should do. The questions we face today are not simply technical, they are legal, ethical, economic, and philosophical. How should sensitive information be protected? What degree of transparency should accompany systems that influence important decisions? How do we encourage innovation while preserving privacy and civil liberties? What safeguards should exist when artificial intelligence assists in areas involving healthcare, finance, public safety, or national security? These are debates that democratic societies are only beginning to have, and they will likely continue for many years. Palantir sits at the center of many of those conversations, not because it is the only company building this future, but because it illustrates how rapidly the relationship between technology and government is changing. The broader story extends far beyond one corporation. Around the world, public institutions and private companies are investing in artificial intelligence, cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity, satellite communications, advanced analytics, and quantum research. Each represents a different piece of an emerging digital foundation that will shape the decades ahead. Whether that future becomes more open or more restrictive, more transparent or more opaque, more empowering or more intrusive, will not be determined by software alone. It will be determined by the choices societies make about how these technologies are governed, where limits are established, and what principles are considered non-negotiable. Technology has always reflected the values of the people who build it and the societies that choose how to use it. That remains true today. The story of Palantir is still being written. So is the story of artificial intelligence. So is the story of digital identity, cybersecurity, and the next generation of computing. None of us knows exactly where those stories will lead, but we are living through the opening chapters, and the decisions made over the next decade will likely influence the relationship between citizens, governments, and technology for generations to come. The most important question then isn't whether this future is arriving. In many respects, it already has. The real question is whether we'll shape it deliberately or simply adapt to it after someone else has made the decisions for us. Thank you for joining us for this two-part series on Palantir and the future of the digital world. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future investigations as we continue separating fact from speculation and examining the technologies that are quietly reshaping our world. Until next time, thanks for listening to On the Record.